I'm Pat McGoy, and I'm an artist. A key area of my practice is around landscape paintings. I paint both on location and in studio. Currently, with the virus isolation, I thought it was a great time to put together some teaching videos. I hope you enjoy this series, Paint With Me. The first session is on value. I believe value is the most important ingredient in a painting. When asking the question, how dark or light is this color note? That is value. We have to learn as artists to create value scales in gray, red, orange, or green, or any color we're about to use in our palette. Here's a practical example of how this works. If you were painting a cube, you could actually get that in just 3 values. However, if you want to show that cube in distance, you have to add more values to show it going off. Taking a circle and trying to turn it into a sphere requires more values because the light is diffracted as it hits the sphere and giving it that three-dimensional image. Take a minute, pause the video, and print out this PDF below. Grab yourself a set of pencils. You may want to use 2 hard and 2 soft leads. And we're going to here build our own value scale. We're going to make up this value scale and sphere and use it as a guide when we do paintings and future work. In the second half of this video, you'll use it as you paint the same sphere. This value scale starts as the darkness, the darkest part is a 9 and going down to the lightest, which is a 1. In doing the value scale, your soft pencils make the darkest marks. One of the tricks you can use when you're going down the scale is to skip a space, allowing you to, in fact, get the shading that goes in between the 2 spaces more accurately. I noticed when I was reviewing the video that the gradation between values is not as great on the video. Sorry about that. That was a filming error. But make sure that you get a really good gradation going from top to bottom. Once you complete your scale, keep it safe. You'll use it in other projects. And get used to the idea of referring to color in terms of values. You might say that's a deep blue sky with a value of 6. As we move over to the circle, what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that the light for the circle is at the top left, shining down over the top of the circle. From here, we're going to identify what we think is the center, and we're going to put a curved line on that center as if we're going over the surface of a ball or an apple, something that's round. And we're marking gradation points on that top of the sphere, which will represent our gradation from a value of 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be the transition point between the top and the bottom of the sphere. With a bright light, single source bright light coming down to the top left, once you get to the center, that light cannot actually get to the bottom of the sphere. So it becomes much darker and in shade. And there's where you're going to be using your values. At the center is 5, 6, 7, coming right to the very bottom, and possibly into an 8. Where the sphere hits the table is, or any object hitting other surfaces, where the darkest shadow is. In this case, it's a 9. We're drawing out the shadow. It could be a very harsh line right next to the sphere, and it gets fuzzier as it goes out. And you're now doing your value study in reverse. So 8, 7, 6, and then 5, 4 over the edge of the table. Finding those center points again, but thinking about the background, we're going to follow that rule, which is dark on light, light on dark. Where the sphere is quite light, where the light is hitting the sphere, that's where we're going to actually put the darkest marks for the background. Doing that in a very dark marks allows the sphere, actually, or pops the sphere forward. As the sphere gets darker, we're actually putting on much lighter marks. On the tabletop, behind the sphere itself, going across the back of the table, we're going to go very lightly, as though there's light passing along the table behind the sphere. That will actually give the sphere more of a dimension and again popping forward. We're also going darker as we come towards the front of the table and darker on the right hand side. Using an eraser, we're going over some of the areas that might have been a little bit too dark or require a little bit of cleaning up. And in hindsight, looking at the bottom of the sphere, it definitely needs to be darker. So just like you would do in any work of art, at the very end we get a chance to see all the elements on paper or on canvas. That's when you start to do your adjustments, until finally you're satisfied that you really have a three-dimensional looking sphere. We're going to use this as a guideline and move on to transfer the same image over to canvas and paint it using Ultramarine Blue and Cadmium Orange. Blue and orange opposite each other are complementary colors, and all complementary colors make black. So there's our Cadmium Orange, our Ultramarine Blue. Mixed together, this is the black. Testing to make sure it's really a neutral black, adding a little bit of white to it to actually make a gray, truly a neutral gray. Now that we have those colors mixed, we can take the same black, and that becomes our value 9. Add black to our pile of Cadmium Orange, working our way down the value scale lighter and lighter as we go, and eventually getting to a value of 4, which will be, in fact, the straight out of the tube Cadmium Orange. Now that is as light as it can go, so in order to make it lighter, we bring in other colors. So we're bringing in Cadmium Yellow Light and Cadmium Medium. This is Cadmium Medium with a little bit of orange in it. This is Cadmium Light with a little bit of orange in it. We then bring in Transparent Red Oxide and Cadmium Yellow Light, and we mix those together, make a very small puddle. We take a tiny bit of that and we put it into our titanium white, and that becomes our level 1 for our value scale. What we're trying to do is we're trying to remove that really harsh, cold color from the titanium white. Looking at the value scale and thinking of the ball, which we're turning it into a sphere, we're starting off with a value of 6 and 7 for the part of the sphere that is under, in the shade or away from the direct light. And we're going lighter as we work our way up. So 6, 7. And as we hit the center of the sphere, we're getting straight into the Cadmium Orange, which we are by this painting, we're saying the actual color of this object is Cadmium Orange. And this is what Cadmium Orange looks like in shadow or in light. And above the sphere, where the light is overexposing the Cadmium Orange, if you like, we're then using our 3 and 2 values and holding off on the highlight, which we'll do later on when these colors dry, and we can add it on to the highlight spot. Going on to the shadow, we're mixing our darkest colors, and this part of the palette, which I'm showing you here, is split. You'll see as we go down, we're mixing each of the values in both a warm and a cool value. So if we're saying that for example, that part of the shadow is a value 5, we're going to mix a value 5 warm and a value 5 cool. Some artists follow the expression that says a warm object has a cool shadow. However, I like to paint it so that an object has both a warm and a cool shadow. Thinking about the background, we follow the same principle. We identify in the sphere the light and the dark. the shadow is going to be follow that same principle of light on dark, dark on light. So where the shadow is very dark, we put on our lightest palette of color, and where it is very light, we're going to put on our darkest. So this color is made out of ultramarine blue and titanium white, and it's just in three gradations. And the very darkest shadow is going to be closest to the lightest part of the sphere, and just as in your drawing, it will make the sphere come forward and pop off the page, pop off the canvas. Looking at the tabletop, we're using, assuming it's white. So for the white tablecloth, we're using three different values. We're using a lighter color on the left, and we're getting a slightly darker on the right. And we're making that band in behind the sphere, which brings the sphere forward. As we move to the back of the table, or the foreground of the table, we're adding in a darker color, and again, we're going to be darker on the left than the right. And then we're taking the last sets of color, and we're going over the edge of the table for the table in shade. So here is, after a few adjustments, the final palettes of color that we've used, and the sphere with its highlight, and a blue cool color added into the shadow to complete the painting. Here are more examples where I've repeated this exercise over and over again. I suggest that you do, and you'll get a true understanding of value. Well, thank you very much for watching. That's it for my first video on value. I hope you take the time to subscribe and like, and I'll see you on the next one.